morning, but I can go ahead and start so we can start moving as well. There are plenty of chairs. I don't think we're going to be like standing room only, but this is a really great batch of people to have you all with us today. So just keep eating and doing what needs to be done, and I'm going to cover my notes and make sure why I need them. And they're not working anyway, so I'm not going to use them. So again, welcome. This is the session on the healing power of stories, community, and technology. Okay, so if that's where you want to be. This is where we are. Okay, good. I always like to check that. Every once in a while somebody go, wait, I'm in the wrong space. So you're in the right space for that. I wanted to say a little bit about these working sessions over the years. This is different than the workshops yesterday. I don't think anyone's giving away CEUs for our time together today. This is about moving forward, so this is a working session. Out of these working sessions, Bridges to Care was born. So you can kind of start thinking about this space as the delivery room, right? And for 2 hours almost, we're going to be, I don't know what this baby's going to look like, and it might not be one baby. We might have, I don't know, however many people are in here. Hopefully you're going to walk out with something that you want to go forward with in your life. So our time together is not about coming to a decision about one thing. It's about utilizing our imagination and moving forward together as a community. And really, if you weren't here yesterday, the recordings are going to be up, but Thomas Insall spoke yesterday. Please make sure and watch that video, share it with other people. It's really important to the movement that we're doing and going forward. And what he emphasized, and somebody correct me, I'm going to give my bottom line, what he emphasized is that healthcare, medicine, neuroscience, he kind of made a list, they're doing great work. But the gap is what's sitting in this room, right? People, place, and purpose. People, place, and purpose. So that's what we're focusing on. People, place, and so I even reset the chairs. Because if we're going to be community, we have to look like community. And community doesn't come in rows, right? In fact, it usually looks a lot messier than this. And if you've ever observed a birth, you know it's not clean. It's a messy thing, right? And so that's what we're about. I mentioned about at the intersection from the microphones a little bit ago about gatherings of people every Thursday morning. There's a gathering of folks, and it's been happening since the beginning of COVID. But faith, civic, community leaders coming together, getting smarter together, sharing wisdom together, forming collaboratives together, and moving things forward. We generally have a briefing. Our time together is supposed to be 30 minutes. Somehow it's really developed into more like an hour-ish. But we give out all the main content at least between 8 and 8:30. So we're going to be getting some info from some folks up here on some things that are afoot. And then we're going to somehow, I haven't figured this part out yet, but somehow then we're going to be talking together about how that might move forward. Okay? Great. So the first thing I want to invite you to do, though, is to look around the room at all the empty chairs. And there are even some up here. Right? And in the Judeo-Christian, those would be Elijah chairs. In our tradition today, they're San Antonian chairs. All right? So our work today is in the midst of 2 million people. So I'm inviting your imagination to sit there, right? We could really go into this whole birth and a baby thing in terms of metaphor, but I'm not going to. But, so we're this little seed in the middle of a great big city. And I'm not going to review context, because you wouldn't be in this room if you didn't have some context of what's going on in the world. So that's what we're doing today. Is that cool? Yeah. Okay, great. I'm probably forgetting something. Again, I had notes. And before I go any further, this will be just like, so pin this in your head. Things that I might be talking about today, there might be flyers and information on the table outside. So you want to look and see that. One example of what we're going to be talking about today is also out there, an invitation to something else. There's also a place, a red bowl, if you have a business card or another little scrap piece of paper, I don't care. But if you put your name and some contact information on it, we're going to have a drawing and somebody's going to have lunch with the mayor. And yesterday somebody said, well, what if I don't want to talk to the mayor? I said, then don't put your name in there. You know, I'm not collecting these names, I'm just, here, I'll go do it. And then somebody else said, what does that mean? I could talk to him about anything. And I said, yeah, that's exactly what it means, but maybe I should come too, because you might need somebody to kind of moderate that. So anyway, on your way out, make sure and do that if you would like to maybe have lunch. It might be a while before you get to have lunch with them, but that's how we'll work it, okay? So I didn't want to forget those things, because we get to the end, you know. So, Bill, I don't know how you're operating this equipment. I would like to go to storyportalsatx.org, and you can do this on your phone. Now, I found though the Wi-Fi here isn't, like, my phone's been funky ever since I got here. So I encourage you to go there. Bill's going to take us there. And while he's finding it, I'm going to do some really brief intros of the folks that are up here. So, Bill, who's sitting here, how many folks in the room know about the San Antonio Community Resource Directory, also known as sacred.org? Yay! Great. So this is the tech guru who made it happen. He's also now the executive director for sacred.org. But sacred.org, everything we're going to be talking about, came about through collaboratives and community efforts. Now, I mentioned on stage that Doug is a volunteer. That was an important thing. No one pays him to coordinate what he's doing here. So this is about community that's committed to community and compassion and healing. So now we're all on the same page, right? But Doug is just such a prime example of somebody who's just so committed. He needs time off. But he only reports, I think, to one place. And so that's his own conversation, right? Anyway, I'll get you drift. There are chairs up here. I promise that we don't bite. So there's some chairs over here. You probably don't want to sit in the chairs behind. But scroll down on this. This is I'm doing introductions. I'm so sorry. Here is Bill. Yes, ma'am.
So what's the website again, please?
The website is Story Portal, all run together. Story Portal SATX, all run together. Story Portal SATX.org. All right? So I'm going to continue. I'm so sorry about the introductions. I got stuck on the tech guru. So David Pocta. David is one of the co-facilitators of the Essay Story Collaborative. No.
The other collaborative.
I know. I did that wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry. He's right. I'm wrong. So he is a co-facilitator of the Healing Community Collaborative. So as you scroll, wrong one. No, stay here. Don't listen to the person with the mic. Anyway, stay at the story portal. That's where we're headed. And we want to scroll down to, keep on, you're almost there. Right there. Not very easy to read. Can you make that bigger?
Yeah.
Okay, so while he's doing that, I'm right on the right webpage now. So David Pocta, co-facilitator, Healing Community Collaborative. We're going to be talking about that in a little bit, and there's another webpage we're going to be looking at. And then it's also my honor to introduce, if you've not met this woman, but Dr. Junda. She is the city's medical director. She was the one who guided us all through the pandemic.
Wow.
And 100 other people, right? But she's really humble. She also received the San Antonio Golden Rule Award for treating others the way she wished to be treated through the pandemic. And I think so. Junda's going to be kind of giving us her insight from her perspective as we talk about what she sees and potential. Isn't that great?
Yes.
I'm very excited about that. Yeah, that all just happened in the last hour, poor thing. Anyway. So, I'm going to start. So, none of them are prepared. I said we've been preparing our entire lives. For this moment, right? Although I could have Sharon. Sharon's here with the story portal. So, I'm going to talk a little bit about the story portal. And why the SA Story Collaborative, Community Collaborative exists. And it's based on ancient wisdom and current research. Because when you read these things, you're like, oh, what? It's like we have to study ourselves to figure ourselves out, right? Right. So these things that are listed on the story portal, we could have made them sound like research, but that's where they came from, right? So sharing stories. Good afternoon, Bill. That's 39%. There it is. Sharing stories increases our sense of human connection. That's based on research of humans. That's what happens. We become more connected when we share our story and when we listen to stories. It creates community. Telling stories turns off our stress response and flips on our self-repair. It grounds us when we're anxious, and especially in those anxious moments that, it grounds us. If we can get to the story of the person who's hurting, it grounds both of us. And you listen to it, right? Stories relax our nervous system and help heal anxiety, anger, fear, and loneliness. Equate mental wellness, spiritual wellness, physical wellness, just make the list. Telling and hearing stories heals us. Why else would all of our sacred scripture be simply the writing down of stories? We're reminded in the telling and listening that we're not alone. We're part of a bigger thing. And even this room is a part of a bigger thing. Someone's story can elicit empathy and cooperation. You might have that moment and go, oh, we're more alike. People can be inspired into action. I hope everything they've heard in the last 24 hours is inspiring that, right? Stories heal individuals and families, communities and cities, history and hearts. So the Story Collaborative was formed to help heal our community. And what we began to discover is there are a lot of story projects out there in San Antonio. So if you would scroll a little bit further, Bill, down on this page. I think he's doing email while he's up here.
Convenient QR code.
So right here. So phase one of this collaborative. So if you're ever interested in joining a collaborative, you just need to let me know. And I can tell you about all the 12, 15, however many we have right now. But phase one of this collaborative, to get something moving quickly, was like, well, let's find out who's collecting stories out there, right? And to our surprise, I mean, each of us probably knew like one or two projects that are out there, but I think we've collected near 20, and we're still finding them, right? And so we've invited them to be a part of this portal. And so maybe you could stop on one. Here's one on human trafficking, ransom life. Stories from No Child Sold campaign. Did you know that happens? I'm like, that happens? And did you know there's an organization in town that is a collaborative and it's working with that? So part of the project too is not only hearing the stories, but also then connecting this community. And so all this portal is meant to do is to have teachers, clergy, make your list, neighborhoods, be aware of the stories that are out there. And you might even find the actual storyteller to come and be a part of some gathering, right? So let's just click on one, I don't know. Go up a little bit. Yeah, I want to go to, they're different too, like Living in My Skin, those are paintings along with stories. The Interfaith Welcome Coalition, that's in terms of migration and stories here. I want to go to, of course, Compassion San Antonio. Yeah, now, and on each of the ones, projects, then it has a doorway, a link to their project. My friend tells the other day, she's like, I signed on just to look at our website, and I was found in it for 2 hours. Because she just started reading and listening, and she said she was so inspired and hopeful, right? So I don't know if you know this happens, but we have a volunteer in town who collects every day, every week, from our media, stories of compassion, without ever using the word compassion, but things that's in it, and it's like 5,000 stories now in this Twitter feed. Some child could write a paper, some big person could get a PhD probably off of this Twitter feed. And so these are all San Antonio stories, thousands of them, from our local media of all kinds. So they're done in different ways. So that's the story portal, coming from the SA Story Community Collaborative. Now, Bill, if you could go to the Healing Community. It's called healingsatx.org. Now, the intention of both of these, if you even look at the address, is that we want to give it away to every other city anywhere. So it would become Story Portal Austin, Healing Houston. They can take the template and they can create healing instantly. It's taken us a while to build these, not long. It's moved pretty fast. Now scroll down, and then I'm going to hand that conversation over to David to talk about it. I want to go a little bit further. Here we go, right here. 10 steps to healing community, because that's where all of this connects. Research, again. Ancient wisdom, again. Create safe spaces and people places. Rocket science. Not. Practice listening and name the pain. Provide ways to build relationships. Notice and note what's happening in our bodies. Encourage breathing through outdoors. Humor. We take in more oxygen when we laugh. It's good for the brain and healing. Recognize togetherness among us. Express what's going on inside of us. Express what's going on outside of us. Remember that being, feeling, and thinking together equals community. Being, feeling, and thinking together. Remember, hate is not the opposite of love. Love can include hate, but it is much more interested in growth, wisdom, and learning. So I'm going to hand it over to David. Talk to us a little bit about the healing community, other than just the words. we had lots of discussion just about how the words are lined up. So we're not going there, but Healing Community Collaborative.
So this started in March. The mayor came on actually to one of our At the Intersection Thursday morning briefings that Ann was just talking about, and had shared that across the country the idea was, how do we help our municipalities deal with this collective trauma that's happened because we certainly recognize over the last few years, not only have we had this pandemic that we've all experienced, but we've seen a lot of social movements and political challenges and all kinds of other traumas that have affected us as a community. So, of course, we want to address trauma as individuals, which is really what a lot of this conference is about, how we help individuals. But there's another component to trauma, which is our sociological component, us together. And in experiencing trauma together, how do we then start moving towards healing together as a society? And one of the biggest things we discussed up front was as much as we want people to get individual help for their individual challenges, part of the problem has been the isolation that's happened over the last 3 years. Because when we're not together, we don't naturally grow and heal and connect because we are social people, right? So a lot of what's driven the work in this is how do we help people get back together? How do we create that connection at the local level with our neighborhoods? How do we get people more involved? Even we've talked a lot about service, community serving community. How do we get people together going to help other parts of our community? And so that's really what's driven a lot of the work that we're trying to do, is to just facilitate that. So even taking things like, if we could bring up the 5 friends thing, I want to talk briefly about we're trying to find ideas worth repeating. And so there was a great story of a high school student who did during the pandemic this idea that he took from his Catholic tradition from the 19th century about someone who found 5 friends and they came together to find a way to serve their community. And he said, let's do 5 friends now. And so here's a high school student who kind of starts this little movement of 5 friends.
Here in San Antonio.
Yes, here in San Antonio. And so we think this is an idea worth repeating. How do you make a change? How do you heal? Find 5 friends and go do something together that serves the community. So part of what we're trying to do is to gather great stories, great things worth repeating, events that are building community, and bring those into a central space so that we can always be cognizant and aware of and inspired by ways to work together to heal the community.
Beautiful.
Right? Pretty much it.
I think that's pretty much it. Maybe you could say, though, a little bit about what it's been like to work in the collaborative.
So, yeah, this has been really fascinating for me. So I come out of a more, I was a pastor, now I'm an academic, a scholar, so I come out of that space, and it's been really fun stepping into this community space where we're working together. So Dr. Wu, who works with Metro Health, and of course Ann and myself, and we had the executive director of the Children's Bereavement Center, and we've got the volunteer coordinator for United Way, and we have a pastor's wife, and we have, so to come together representing these different aspects of the community and having this conversation every week has been really fulfilling in and of itself. But we're finding more and more like-minded people that want to be part of this conversation. Hint, hint, if that's you, please let me know. We would love to have you part of this discussion. We meet every Tuesday at 4 o'clock for an hour and a half, every other Tuesday. And just to keep building on this, how do we keep working together towards this end? We have actually someone involved from the UTSA Mental Health Department or Training Center also involved. So we're looking for more partners in this process, but to continue to build that. So that's been a huge part of the fun of the work. It's actually working together with such a diverse group.
Can you tell the website again?
Healing. Go ahead.
HealingSatx.org. HealingSatx.org.
Thank you.
Bill is kind of scrolling through some of those examples. Block captains, Porch Fest, that's David's favorite. And a little bit we're gonna actually hear from the mayor, but you'll see he'll chuckle when we get to big stress. What's it called? Stress bingo. No, bingo till eliminate stress or something. But you'll see he'll chuckle because in his head he's thinking, well, there's something, right? So none of it is again rocket science, but to try to look at things. Neighborhood night out is here, but we're doing it. We're encouraging it to be done differently in San Antonio. you know, neighborhood night out is one night. Well, you know, like why isn't it happening every weekend in your neighborhood? What? Yeah, he's got it. He's got it. So they're all worth, well, you know, replicating your own way, right? But just to give us a way, like prayer vigils are mentioned here. It's another way that we gather and heal. It's just about gathering. Pathways to hope is worth repeating. And not just next year in your congregation. This is a gathering. That's what a conference is. Sharing knowledge, sharing wisdom. I know last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, but I think it was the Rafa cohort in the east side, and they more or less had their own kind of, they called it something else, the Pathways to Hope over in their community. Like, this is a great idea, we need to gather people together and learn together. So we'll put that one up. So now I'm going to move it to Bill. And again, it's hoped that we will hand this away to Austin and other places, Healing Austin. So Bill's going to tell us about sacred.org, not how it works, because it works so easily. Bill it's intuitive, it works well. But I've asked Bill, because he comes from the tech field, why technology and why people? What's that intersection about?
So I'll tell the story of how Sacred started. All right, so it's it took 15 years, but so about it did.
I missed those 10. Where were the other 10?
So here's the short version. I used to have a job as a software developer at a big company here in town that probably all of you have purchased something from, and none of you even know about. So it's but I hired this guy, young kid from Pennsylvania. He was a good guy, and he worked for me for a while, and then he left to go do something else. And then one day I was just walking down the street in downtown San Antonio, and I run into him. And he's like, "Hey, I'm moving back to Pennsylvania, but I have this project I've been working on that I can't finish. Would you be interested in taking it over?" So I'm like, "Well, sure, yeah, I'll talk to you." So he takes me to meet Ann, and now 5 years later, I work for Ann. So that's how it works. I mean, and so you just kind of get sucked into the sphere. So she says, I have this idea for this thing where people can find each other and can. So do you think we can do that? And I'm like, yeah, probably. and she just keeps telling me things. So I had no idea what she was talking about. And so she just keeps telling me, well, it would like people could find each other and they could see what's going on in their neighborhood. And so so I just kind of kept listening, right? And she tells the story that she says, she would always ask, well, could we do this? And I would always be like, yeah. And I didn't know what she was talking about most of the time, right? But I'm just like, yeah, we can do that. And so then, but eventually we figured it out, and it became something real, right? And once we finally understood what the vision was, and we kind of developed that. So sacred.org was really developed for these purposes. So a quick show of hands for each of these questions, right? Do you know where the nearest food pantry is to where you live? So some people do. So at this event, we're going to get more positive answers to these questions. But if you needed new glasses and you didn't know and you couldn't afford them, would you know where to go to get some? Right? If you need you have a dental problem, you need a cavity filled, do you know where to go? Do you know where you have no cost? Do you know where the PTSD support group is closest to your house? Do you know where the nearest public bathroom is here if you're experiencing homelessness and you need to go? So these are questions that people have that they need an answer to, and so we created Sacred to answer these questions. So the easiest way to understand what Sacred is to use it. So it's very simple. You simply come in here and you put in your zip code. Everything's based on your zip code. So you can put in the zip code where you live or work. So let's just put in 78213. And then you begin to search it. So you can either look at the categories that we have. We have 100 different categories of services and almost 8,000 programs that we put into the program. So let's say I want a food pantry that's close to here. So you can type in food pantry, you can say, show me all the food pantries. We get a map,
Wow.
and here's a list. So each of these pens is a place that is handing out food. Not necessarily today, but at some point, and so then you can look down and you can see, okay, here's one, this is close by. It's all based on proximity, so everything's sorted. This is half a mile away from us. And we can see it's open Thursday from 11 to 2, okay? So now you can just continue to do this over and over again. So follow the stories. So, there's a young woman who's working 2 jobs. She's got a couple of kids. She doesn't quite have enough food to get through the month. She needs assistance. So what are her options? She can call, she can go to Haven, she can call somebody, she can try to find a case manager, or she can come to Sacred.org. She can self-avail herself of this information and go to one of these organizations and seek assistance. Often we find people using Sacred.org that are coming from a faith community. So maybe this young woman winds up at church on Sunday, and she confides in someone at the organization that she's having this food problem, and they say, well, I know about this great resource, Sacred.org. Let's go look at it together, and then so now we've built a relationship between this young woman and her faith community. The faith community has fed her soul and then fed her literally, and so now we're able to create these connections and help people meet their basic needs. It can be done as an individual. I don't need to be dependent on a case manager or social worker unless I want to be. If I want to do this myself, I can. If I want to find help, then you can use Sacred to find a case manager or social worker that can help guide you through this. And if you are working in a faith community or a nonprofit, and somebody approaches you, a client, a parishioner, somebody that just needs assistance, you can use this to help to guide them to a place where they can find compassion. So we can.
Do the mental
I was
health
just
group.
going to do that. So we also have 1,400 mental health services. So we're at Pathways to Hope today. We're talking about mental health needs. So we have a mental health service, a mental health portal, where we've identified, it's currently up to 1,483 mental health services that we have identified in San Antonio, where you can go to find some kind of mental health assistance. But mental health services, as you all know, are varied, and there's a lot of different services, there's a lot of different needs. So it's very simple. You can come in and put in your zip code and follow this down. So let's imagine ourselves again. Maybe we're, Carol, we'll do the Carol story. Carol has a teenage son, and he's kind of become withdrawn. He used to enjoy, hanging out with his friends and playing games, and now he doesn't do any of that. He doesn't seem to find pleasure in anything that he's done before. He just kind of keeps to himself. She's worried about this. She's kind of seen this before. She knows that he probably needs to talk to somebody right away. She's got Medicaid, so she can pay with that. And she lives in the 78223 zip code. So we can use Carol, can come in here, she can put in her zip code. She can say, I'm looking for something in person. She can look for telehealth, peer support, these other options. I need something in person. I don't have a diagnosed condition, but I can look at these experiential questions. I can see one that maybe is describing what I'm experiencing or what my son is experiencing. And right away now I have a list of services. So from 1,400, we've narrowed it down to the 50 or so that are closest to her that can treat an individual that's feeling withdrawn and out of touch. We can continue to sort that down. So let me show me something for a teenager. Give me something that takes Medicaid. So now we've gone from, again, 1,400 down to, here's 50 services. We're showing you 50. There's probably 300 that we've identified here, but we're not going to give you a list of 300. We're going to give you a list of 50. These are all close to where she lives. Some are just a few miles away. And all of them are able to treat signs of depression or anxiety in children and take Medicaid to pain. So right here in 30 seconds, we've narrowed down onto a short list of all places that Carol can contact that can now maybe can help her. She can look at it on a map if she wants to. So maybe she lives, in this part of the zip code over here, or she can narrow it down to what she wants. So yeah, so we can click on it. We can interact with the pins, and we can see what's going on here. With each one, we can click on one of these, and we can get the detailed list of, of what is taking place at each of those locations. You can get to their website, their contact information. If they have eligibility requirements, so maybe you have to be of a certain age, or you have to live in a certain zip code, then those will be listed here. Some places require payment. Most of what's on sacred.org is free, but some places do require payment. So we have information about what those fees might be. So, but again, we've taken 1,500 services almost and narrowed it down very quickly into these places where Carol might find assistance for her child. So again, and then we facilitated a connection here. So Carol goes to this place, makes a call. Now she's got a connection with a case manager, maybe with a therapist. That therapist is likely aware of Sacred and can use this tool again to guide Carol and her son to somewhere else, maybe beyond this need of counseling for her son. Perhaps she also needs assistance with transit, getting to and from the appointments. Maybe we discovered that there's a mentoring need or help with tutoring or homework assistance, which may be the core of the problem for her son. Those things can be found on sacred.org. Maybe it's, he's in need of a mentor, a big brother, big sister type arrangements. Those things can be found on sacred.org. So again, we're providing by identifying what everybody does in the community, and then bringing it together in a simple way to list and see, we're able to create those connections.
Can you filter by more than one thing? For example, if you're female, you need recovery service, and you're homeless?
So homelessness is not one of the filters, but we do have filters by, if you wanted so let's see, I wanted a peer support group. I don't have a diagnosed condition, but I'm going to say I have a substance abuse concern. And I want an all-female group, and I want it in Spanish. I can do that. There's one. So that's in Spanish, but so here's some. These are ones that will offer female segregated groups.
I was just wondering, how do people know about you?
Well, they come to Pathways to Hope. Short answer is, so we tell as many people as we can about this. We have social workers and case managers and agencies that are making use of Sacred, and so they're telling individuals and they're telling their clients. We offer at our table out in the lobby, we have small pocket cards that you are welcome to take a stack of those that you can hand out to clients that go. We are, it's a tech solution, so we have some SEO that's going on. So if you go into Google and search for certain search terms in Google, you'll wind up on sacred.org and one of those things. And so, and really, it's word of mouth primarily at this point. I'm trying to buy ads on via buses, so if anybody is.
That'll be great.
So,
Well needed.
It's also part of the Bridges to Care training.
it is.
So all those 600 plus wellness champions to date, which we hope will end up being 6,000 wellness champions, are utilizing that right there in their community and congregations. How many people go there per week, day?
It's about 6,500 a week currently that are using the site. 6,500 transactions on the site. So no, I won't say that 6,000 individual people use it, but we do get case managers and social workers that use this 5, 10, 12 times a day, as well as individuals. But it's 6,000, 7,000 times a week. Sacred is delivering information to somebody that's helping them.
What about somebody that's had a brain tumor and is experiencing brain trauma and all of that?
I would say yes. There is probably a category in here for brain trauma and traumatic brain injury. So I would say, I'm going to say yes, right, because we have everything. And so, but it would probably take me a minute to find out. But yeah, but I would say that you will likely find organizations that can treat that kind of.
And there's an organization where, because, the cost and all of that.
Sure. So in Sacred, we list programs that they have to be available to anyone. Okay, which means that they don't have to be free, but they have to be available to anyone, which means we don't list membership programs. So if your faith community has a program that's only for the members of your faith community, then that's great. That's a great program, but that's not a sacred.org program. Okay, so the program is for people. It has to be available to anyone. And it doesn't have to be free, but it has to be affordable, or at least on a sliding scale. The one exception is in the mental health work, in the mental health portal. A lot of those are chargeable services, and many of those providers are for-profit therapists and organizations. So we include them, but they have to at least take private insurance. So we do not include cash-only programs in the mental health portal. But we do include places that take Medicare, Medicaid, private insurance, sliding scale, that type of service. And we review every listing at least once a year. So at least one time a year, somebody from sacred.org has called this phone number or sent an email to this location, check the website to make sure that the organization and the program is still there. So we make sure that it's there so that when you go to Connect, you're going to find it. And we get, there's this little feedback button on every list. If you call this person and they're not there, you can click this feedback link on every page, and you can tell us about it, right? If we got something wrong, because we have 8,000 programs, there's almost 7 million characters of data in our database, so it's a lot, and so we've made a mistake or two in there. But you know, if you find that, you can send it to us and we correct these right away. We get about 3 or 4 of these every day, and we respond to them usually within a day.
So we're gonna move forward. I know you're gonna have lots of questions.
I'll be here after.
He's gonna be here after, because we're here to work on moving forward. So, but it did remind me, and I can't wait to get to Dr. Wu's input here, but Bill reminded me too of some other research that we use in all of our collaboratives. Again, not rocket science. One of the things that, when you hear it, when I started this position, I had no idea that each of our federal departments had, they call them something different, but basically faith liaisons like myself. Yeah, did you hear that? Oh, yeah. And so at one of these Pathways to Hope, in person ones, actually we've had several of those folks come from DC and Health and Human Services. But in one of those, Ben Odell was here, and he's come a couple of times and led some other community conversations for us. He's really good. Anyway, we were having coffee or something, and I said, Ben, I know part of your job is looking across the United States, particularly in terms of the faith community being involved, right, in the work that needs to be done. Are there some basic things that you have discovered about programs that have great impact, right, in the community? And he said, oh, that's easy. And I'm like, oh, I'm all into easy. Well, you know, like, well, if it's that easy, tell me, because I want to know the secret sauce, right? And he said, it's 2 things. And all of these, I've already talked about it. 2 things. Things are in proximity. Near proximity to the need. So those cohorts that are formed with Bridges to Care, those are all congregations in near proximity to each other who can help all the needs that are in that proximity. I can't tell you how many efforts over the 3 decades I've worked here in San Antonio that I find this out now and I'm like, wow, we were wasting our time. And they didn't work. And we tried to do it again, and it still didn't work, because we were trying to do things citywide. Near proximity to each other and to the needs. Near proximity, and that's how we built Sacred, right? You saw that with the mapping, right? The second thing, this is all research. The second thing is, and if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the things that are at the bottom. The closer you keep your effort to those basic needs, everything else will start working itself out. So where can I find that food pantry?
Say that again, the closer you what?
To the basic human needs,
Oh,
right? So if you can find a food pantry that you can walk to, that you didn't know existed 10 minutes ago, it's going to have more impact in your life than knowing the food bank is over on the southwest side of town. right?
Way over there.
Way over there, right? And they're doing great work. It's not to say that, but, and we need more food pantries, right? But food, and we know what these things are. In fact, this is my transition over to Dr. Wu, and she can tell us what are the most basic needs, right? And anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. But those are the two things: near proximity, basic human needs. Safety, comes with those are. But I've asked Dr. Wu, after listening to all of this, you know, what does she see from her perspective as medical director? I don't know, potential, what do you hear? But first tell us, what are the most basic human needs? This is a test, right?
No, I would say food and shelter, right? Yeah, safety. So you took some of the things that I was going to talk about, but I want to point out how when Bill was talking about Sacred, he started by talking about the story of Sacred, and then he told the story of Carol. Because in addition to the science-based health reasons, the reasons that stories are good for our health that Anne had mentioned, that I was going to talk about, but I won't now, it's also good for messaging, right? The communications people will tell you. There's something sticky about a narrative that comes as a story, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, anything from the power of the parable, like Anne had alluded to stories on TikTok, which, you know, in our COVID communication, you know, if for disinformation or for good, it can be used either way. And one of the things that public health has become very interested in was storytelling. So when Anne asked me this at the last minute, I was immediately in, because we're interested in using storytelling for strategic messaging. You will see stories being told from the perspective of people who have stigmatized conditions, tuberculosis, HIV. Because one of the things I didn't see mentioned in that list of things that stories do is they break down preconceptions, they break down boundaries, right? So there's the format, but the other reason that stories are powerful is the messenger. It's not usually somebody like me. Usually, I'm glad you all, I'm thankful that you all thought it, but there's a whole other subset of people for whom I work for the government and I'm a doctor, and that's 2 strikes against me. So I'm not usually going to be the one who's the messenger in a lot of these stories that public health wants to use. But what we get to do is elevate the person who has lived experience, their message and their concerns. And then that ties into the last bullet point that was on that list of things that stories do, which is that is the seed for social change. If we agree to elevate the concerns held by the people with lived experience, which I think is a segue into the next part of this conversation.
It is. So, Bill, if you would go back to healingsatx.org. So, now hopefully you've learned some stuff or heard something that sparked something, right? And we've been for the last 24 hours, this is the case. So it's not just what's in this room. But you know, like, how might this inspire us to move us forward, right? So the interesting thing, when we showed these 2 new websites, the one on stories and the one on healing community, to the mayor, he said something's missing. He said a call to action. So, I don't know, can we make this happen? Yeah, play it, I'm wondering about sound. Yeah, there's sound on your computer. Can we make sound happen? Where's your sound at? We're working on it. We'll repeat it if we have to.
You have to send it down
Pause it. We got the tech guru up here. We'll make this
Lack of
happen.
engagement, there we go.
San Antonio. From the pandemic to mass shootings and so many things in between, we're all sitting in collective trauma together. Do you recognize any of these symptoms? Numbness, stress, isolation, indifference, lack of engagement, over-functioning, overreaching, polarization, attacks, collective blaming, to name only a few. It's going to take courage, but we've got to step up and take action, both as individuals and as communities. We need to each act responsibly and take up our roles in the collective healing process. Compassion is never a solo or individual effort. What I do impacts all of us. What we do impacts each of us. That's what this Healing Community Collaborative in SA is all about, healing together. Creating safe spaces together. Telling stories and listening to each other's experiences together. Taking opportunities to really see others and realizing that we're not alone in our pain or in our healing. And it can be fun. Porch fests, neighbors together at National Night Out, stress reduction bingo, storytelling, pickup games. Check out some of these real San Antonio examples that are worth repeating in your own neighborhood.
Okay, so that's our call to action. So what I want to invite you to do is to, I'm watching our clock and we've got plenty of time, but that doesn't mean we have to use all the time, right? Just the time we need. I want to invite you to at least turn to one other person. Triads seem to work a little bit better because you get just that much more information. But so 2 to 3 people, no more than that. So everybody gets a chance to talk. But maybe to think about birthing a baby, right? But out of everything you've heard in these last 24 hours, sitting in the context of our city, and sitting in the context that we live in, right? Is there something that has sparked your interest? There's something like, oh, that thing. I kind of want to follow that thing.
Yes.
That you could, yeah, good. And to share that among yourselves, is there something? Right? And then, you know, is there also some sort of call to action that you've been feeling inside? Or in your what if, or what if? What if is a great question. But to just share among yourselves, where might this lead? For you, for our community, what could that look like? And if you maybe even have an idea that's like cooking, share that with the other person. We're gonna do that for a while. And then we'll come back together and hear some of those things. And then what happens as a community, then there's also starts to be cross-pollinizing. Somebody will say something and somebody on this side will go, we were talking about that too, right? That's when collaboratives start to happen. Yes, sir.
Ma'am, I have a question for you if I could take like 5 seconds.
Okay.
If you back me into a corner on religion, I will declare that I am polytheistically agnostic and back away while you try to figure out what that meant. Is there room in this forum for people that aren't necessarily of faith or of Abrahamic faiths? Question mark. Thank you.
Question mark, thank you. That's a good question. I was really hoping that you didn't need to ask it. And that's not out of fear. I was hoping that you knew that everybody was welcome in this room because you felt welcomed, right?
Well, I voted with my feet, I am here, but there is a perception outside of that that I am far too weird in my belief for a lot of people.
Actually, I do know what you're talking about when you say agnostic. I get that.
Yes.
Right. So this work together in community is simply about community.
Fair?
People of faith, no faith, it don't make any difference, right? We do work out of the ethic of reciprocity.
Fair.
And we utilize that term, the ethic of reciprocity, to care for other people the way we want to be treated ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, in religious traditions, that's more commonly known as the Golden Rule. It is a rule that is in every world religion, and I would say it is at the core wisdom of wisdoms. Just care for each other the way we want to be cared for ourselves. So the work we do, even though it has come through the faith, and it's funny too, because Bill right here was like, well, you know, this is when we first met. Can I say this? Yeah. He said, and after I was doing the sales pitch with him and everything, so he would work with me. But he said, you just need to know that I'm not a person of faith. And I'm like, so? Right? All right? Yeah.
It's about caring.
Thank you.
So, it's about caring about your neighbor. Now, maybe you care about your neighbor because you go to a Christian church and the preacher told you you had to. Maybe you care about your neighbor for some other reason. I don't really care why you care about your neighbor. If you do, then we can work together.
Thank you. Thank you both very much.
I'm glad you asked the question. But we have to work on our messaging so that when people walk in the room, they already know that. There's not the perception. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a very important question. And it's been, I think, part of the power that we have found together because of that, right? And this is, for those of us who, I call it holy humor. I do. Because I work for the government, even though I'm clergy, I work for the government. And so because I work for the government, I have to include everybody. Now, how sad is that we don't get that message from within the religious community? I call it holy humor. To be placed in a position where I have to include everybody because I want to anyway, right? But now I have to. And I would challenge anybody in here who is a person of faith, so do you. You don't have to be employed by the government to have to. Okay, so, are we good? Talk to one or two other people and share where you've been sparked, what you've heard, what could happen. Have a conversation. Conversation, by the way, is a relational term. We're storytelling up here too. Lots of stories happening out there, right? Yeah. And how's it feel? Good, right? Okay, we've got 123, I think, yes, 123. And don't we all love the end early? It goes to 2. And I'm not telling, we're not done yet, because we want to hear what's out there. But it was great just to hear the energy in the room and feel it all at the same time. And that's when you know you're in community. This kind of work, a little more neuroscience here, a little more neuroscience. So when we're using our energy, it's a very important thing to go here. And there's also some research around the whole empathy fatigue and compassion fatigue, which we hear almost always as compassion fatigue. But empathy is the place where we can feel the pain and the hurt of another. Our common humanity connects, right? And so somebody who is in that kind of role in their life, that's their job or whatever, and they can empathize. In our bodies, the energy moves outward. This is neuroscience. So it takes energy. And when I worked at Haven for Hope, bless folks' hearts who do direct service and listen to stories because of healing. That's the other thing, we have to tell our stories to heal. We have to tell our stories to heal. And so, like places like at Haven for Hope, some stories I had heard 40 times. But they had to tell that story because they weren't healed yet, right? But if you're sitting there with your empathy and it's moving out like this, right? That's the drain. That's the drain. That's the fatigue. And you have to have empathy to move that into compassion. But compassion's neuroscience does the reverse. It creates energy. It creates energy. And you could be doing really hard work, but you're energized all at the same time. Then you know that you're being, the compassion is at work. And then you're part of the remedy for yourself as well as the other person. You're in it, and you're part of it. And I could feel that energy going on in there. And so, you know, like if you ever go to like planning and you're a meeting or something and it's just like, and to the point like, I'm done. Well, it's because something's not humming right. You're probably you're asking the wrong questions or something's not happening. And so the brave person should just say, you know, this isn't working. We're all tired, it's draining our energy. Can we please figure out what the right question is? And then move forward? That's a bold place, by the way. I know you've all been in gatherings like that, and then everybody goes out in the parking lot and goes, ugh. That was the worst, you know, hour I've lost in my life, right? Say it in the middle of it. For everybody's sake. That's compassion. Compassion isn't, oh, my boss loves this one. Compassion is not necessarily nice, but it's always kind. That's a difference. So that niceness in gatherings that are just killing our energy and taking your life away from you, you need to be kind, but need to speak up and say, we're not humming here. Something else needs to happen. Okay, that was not meant to be talked about, but that's important. So I really want to hear, but you're going to have to stand up, I think. These are not wireless, and I don't know if we need to come forward, but I want to hear some of the things that you've said and you've talked about, an idea or, I don't know, an insight. It doesn't make any difference. But I want to invite, you know, some community. I want to hear what happened out here. So is anybody brave enough to just stand up and tell us an idea? Oh, there you go. We're going to hear several. But you need to stand up so that everybody can hear. That's why the standing.
Okay, my name's Edna Cruz and I live here in San Antonio. And the idea that I shared with our group is I have a niece who is not a very good mother and has created 4 children. And I'm trying to find a space that is, you know, people would be the kids, the four kids. And the place would be Sunday dinner at our house. And people, place, and purpose is to find out what each one of the kids is interested in. What is their purpose? What is their next goal? What are they experiencing? What problems do they have? And how my husband and I can provide a safe place where you can talk about anything, where anything that's said there is not repeated again. So you don't want to go home and say, yeah, Deb's sad, or Uncle Danny's sad. You know, it's all private and it's not to be repeated. And then they can set, you know, the tone for what they want to talk about, what their issues are. We can help them set a goal to overcome. And hopefully mentor them through a process, whether, you know, it's diet, exercise, schoolwork, sex, drugs, you know, whatever it is they want to talk about. And then be able to end Sunday dinner and have them go home in a happy place with something in mind that they can do, something positive. Come back in 2 weeks and we can talk about, well, where are you? How did you do? Oh, yeah, we had talked about a vision board. Thank you. That's my coworker right there. So talking about a vision board that they can create.
This is a great example of how compassion works, right? It's here. It starts here, and it's what happens in your home, in your neighborhood. Start thinking concentric circles.
Well, I just
right?
want to remove those kids away from
Right.
the toxic environment, put them in a pot, even if it's for 2 or 3 hours on Sunday dinner. If that
You'll
helps,
change their life,
it could.
and it'll change yours.
And
Oh, it will.
unless we try.
Who knows?
Yeah.
Life is just an experiment anyway. None of us know what we're doing.
I-
Or we would have far many more classes and hours needed to have babies. As much classes as we have to do to drive a car. Right? Right. Thank you. We got another.
It's me again.
No, it is you again. Can you stand up? I love your tie-dye, man. Gotta tell
Thank
you.
you. So everybody attributes failure is not an option to the Navy SEALs. Well, if you talk to the Navy SEALs, failure is an option. Failure is a reality. Failure is every day. They say fail early, fail often, and fall forward. When you fall forward and you get up, you gain your whole height in progress. I throw terrible ideas to my team all the time.
This is true.
Thank you. But if you get that seed, that kernel, that was a terrible idea, okay, well, what do you think? It starts the conversation. Failure is always an option. It's what you do next that defines your life. Thank you. Perfect. A catastrophe. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we can even look like at the pandemic and everything that it spurred into action, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Catastrophe.
Can we say that aloud again? Opportunity.
Catastrophe.
All right.
And we've talked a lot about catastrophe. So I'm Kathy. We talked a little bit about one of the challenges that nobody's talking about is what's happened to the physical infrastructure where we work. So for example, when my husband's team all came back to his environment, all of the vending machines were full of bugs. And you get something, the expiration date was good, but you'd open it up and it'd be full of ants. The vending machines, the water was not safe to drink out of where you get your sodas. But nobody's really communicating about that too. It's like, how do we keep everybody safe? And then even within our own homes, and I don't know if that's on sacred, but like, how do you find a plumber? How do you get your air conditioning fixed? How, and all this stuff has taken a little longer. And then that morphed into communication. As a communication professor, I talked about the dual perspective. So you would use how you're feeling first when you have to have a difficult conversation, and then what the action is. So if someone is complaining about something, and if they continue to do that all the time, I could say, wow, I feel really uncomfortable when you talk to me about this, because feelings are never right or wrong. But if you can start with feeling first, it will make the conversation happen. And then we ended by talking about the opportunity to use our dogs to work for us.
Yes.
So I have a search sample. I didn't bring it with me today because I wasn't sure what we were doing. But we talked about how almost any dog at any age could be trained to take on certain functions within your home. And that will in turn help. And that would be another great thing to
Thank you, Kathy. Couple things to that. One, Kathy is one of our instructors with the Compassion Institute here in San Antonio, which is another one of our collaborative efforts we talked about. So you can tell, right?
Join us with that.
Yeah, that's right. Join us. I asked Bill, I said, so Bill, do we have stuff like plumbing and stuff? And he said, sort of. So there is some, and I know it's been a lot of talk, because there's always stuff that's developing. I was also reminded that Sacred also is in Spanish, and Bill brought the Spanish version up. So we didn't mention that before, but it's good to know. And we will be working the other two web pages into Spanish. It's still, in process, but that's one of our next steps. Someone else.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Roy Rios, and I work for a great organization who does statewide referrals, but we're really navigating rebuilding our culture as an organization. I think this is a part of a lot of social service organizations. And I think we've gotten to this place where, as an agency and as staff members, we often forget that we're people. And we don't know why we're even doing the work. I think to your point, compassion fatigue, all kinds of fatigue is happening where I work. And so this storytelling idea really struck me. I had this brilliant coworker who no longer works there tell me one day, she's like, I just don't know, who are the directors? What do they care about? Or why do they work here? And it just got me thinking, what if we told our story about what brought us to this work, why we stay in this work, why we're working at this agency that has a horrible culture because of what it actually is capable of, right? And so it just got me thinking about this portal that you created, leveraging our own internal intranet to tell our stories, to connect as individuals rather than as directors and CEO and coordinators. But instead of all those labels, we're just people who are passionate about ending domestic violence and making our community safer. And many of us have backstories that actually led us to this movement. And let's talk about that. some same people have to talk to you about that thing you forgot to do, or that grant you forgot to put in, or the way that you showed up at the staff meeting, right? But at the end of the day, I'm still a survivor, you're a survivor, you're an activist, and remember that story when we have that critical conversation, because we're all. So thank you for
Is
today.
that amazing? Yesterday, I moderated, which basically meant I introduced people who were presenting, right? And I failed. I should have read their bios before. That's another whole story. But one of the things I recognized, especially like in the first session, I knew all three people who were presenting. And I've known all of them for at least a decade, if not longer. How long? How many decades here? You and I?
Oh my gosh.
I'm talking to Justin.
Oh,
30 years.
30, so we've known each other 3 decades plus, right? And so, no, you. I'm reading these bios of 3 people I've known for decades. And I discovered, I'm like, what? You know, like, how can I know you for 3 decades and not know this thing about you? You know, like, we should start handing out mini bios. Forget the business card. You know, we all need a relationship card or something. You know, you pull out this thing and you say, you know, I don't know what that is, but that was so exciting for me yesterday. I like re-met people I've known and know well. Right? So it's, and Verone mentioned this too in the last panel on stage where she said, you know, it's not transactional. And Bill talks about sacred. It's not transactional. It's relational. And it's technology. And we don't look at technology necessarily that way, right? I didn't. And most of the time I kind of like complain about technology. But fortunately I had a very compassionate partner in this effort who never once used tech whatever with me. You know, like all the, because I feel so small. And we all do it from other directions as well, where we use not people language, but whatever language we use, right? And we've developed. It could be churchy language. It could be the organizational language. It could be whatever. But this guy never did. And he only told half of one story. When he would, you know, see, he would listen to me and he, you can do that, you know. I overhear him like a year into this process telling somebody else. He said, you know, I decided at one point that whenever Ann asked me about something, I would just say yes, even if I had no idea. And I overhear this, I'm like, what? Yeah, look at him, yeah. You have no idea what that yes built for me and my own confidence. I still totally trust him. Every time he said yes, I'm like, cool. And we'd move on, right? And then it'd be another, what if we did this? Yeah, we can do that. And he'd tell somebody, I had no idea how to do it, or what we were going to do.
We figured it out.
We figured it out.
Exactly, you figured it out. That's the team.
And there was another conversation yesterday, but you know, trust, we could have another whole conversation about trust. And how important trust is, how it takes time to develop. I mean, you've heard all these conversations, right? I think the one that we don't talk enough is when you choose it. Love is a choice, life is a choice, trust is a choice, you know, and you can choose it knowing that you're not perfect, but you only have the best things in the world in mind, right? I mean, Sacred.org was built by San Antonians for San Antonians, and they volunteered their way into it. It's like Doug leading this, right? That's a different place to be with people, right? So I encourage you to choose trust. choose trust. I remember when I first got to know Dr. Wu, and I was being sent somewhere for this city, on behalf of the city, and I just couldn't figure out exactly why they were having me go, because I hadn't been a part of the process. I was fairly new, and and we didn't know each other very well yet. I mean, we just met each other.
I admired you from afar.
She admired me. I admire her from near and far. And it's so true. Even when, and so I, talked to her about it, and she said, well, it's important to include the community and the faith community in the health process, and, she was, okay, yeah, I get that. Okay, so that's why I'm going, yeah, okay. So I go to this thing, Princeton, where was it? Where did I go? Way over there somewhere. And I land, and I get into my room, and I'm thinking, now what am I doing here? So I think I emailed her. I said, okay, I'm here. Remind me, what am I doing here? Because I can't really go someplace without purpose, especially when I know that I'm going on taxpayer dollars. I take that very seriously. I'm one budget line item in our city budget, me. And so I'm giving my community everything, right? Because it's my money too. It's your money, we have a responsibility with that, but we chose trust without ever talking about it. Now my boss and I, we had a moment and we chose trust out loud. You can do that. You can say, I think we should just choose. We're gonna both fail at something, but we're gonna fail fast. And we're gonna trust that what we're doing is far too important not, right? I'm not gonna risk it. We're gonna do the best we can. Okay, one more, what time is it? 42, 22. One more, here's one. That's you. Stand up so we can hear you.
I'm Guadalupe Ibarra, mother of 5. I've gone through a lot of different trials in my life, and we've gone through a lot of counseling and yes waivers, the yes waiver program, and different therapies and stuff. And I struggle with my own depression. It comes like a cloud, and sometimes I have my good days where I'm like smiling at everybody, but then I have my bad days where I can't get out of bed. And but my focus is my children, right? And how I show them how to deal with their stuff. And so I was telling my group that we started a healing garden at my house, at my mom's house, in the backyard. And it has a volleyball sand pit, it has a track. I'm gonna put a zip line. It's about 1.5 acres. And my grandma used to live next door, so I can use their So slowly, with my depression, sometimes I can't do too much. And I have 5 kids, I mentioned that, right? So they're calling me from school, so I can't work that. I can't hold a job so I'll do I'm a jack of all trades. I do lots of different things, but this garden is more of my creation, so that way I can find the peace. And it's supposed to be for them so that they can see later. There's supposed to be 7 rooms that I'm gonna make, and they're all gonna be able to utilize them, where they're painting rooms or just therapy, like a music room, growing their own food, and a garden thing. And it's a work in progress because it was very it was wooded, and I drove a big old excavator, and that was awesome. That was awesome. I took down a lot of trees and stuff, but it's taught me something so much more different, to keep just pushing through all the negative and making something beautiful come out of it at the end. And like, after everything is gonna be for like my whole community there, like my aunts and uncles, I tell them, if you have a bad day, just come and use the garden, you know, like just come walk around, so you can feel safe, so you can talk to somebody, you know, and that's kind of what I've gotten through all this.
So what I want to ask a favor of you, that's worth repeating. Creating garden of healing is worth repeating. Having a table gathering that asks about purpose is worth repeating. I'm looking to the co-chair of facilitator here, right? Telling stories in an organization of what even brought you there is not only worth repeating, those stories are worth telling. And so build, your story portal and let us link to that so other people who are struggling where they work can do the same thing, which could be in a bank, it could be in the city structure. I mean, like, it could be in a congregational setting, right? Do we want to hear one more? We have one more.
And I think it ties together.
Awesome, of course it
In
does.
terms of what, some of the things that came up out of our conversation. A young lady that I work with has a mental health diagnosis. It has ruled her life in terms of school and employment for the last several years. She came into a new job, actually at a behavioral health clinic, and didn't mention it. And everything was good until she had a panic attack. And her boss said, well, you can't work here like that. Why didn't you tell us when you applied so that we could make accommodations? And she said, it was so nice to just feel normal even for a week. We've done a tremendous job as a society. I was telling about 32 years ago in Plano, Texas, my mother started a nonprofit for teens that were experiencing homelessness. And nobody in that town wanted to recognize that it was even a problem. We have done such good work recognizing that mental wellness and mental health challenges are a problem and that they're common really to most of us.
Yeah.
And yet, there are people out there that are afraid to come forward because they want to be normal. They believe this myth of normal. And so this idea of sharing stories, the stories of our own challenges with depression, our own challenges with raising 5 children, our own challenges as a survivor, those stories are what it takes to bring us into this place where normal is, I have a challenge. Normal is, I am in recovery. Normal is not this myth, but this reality that we all have a story. And so that importance of simply having places where stories are told, stories are heard, and stories are welcomed. It's just such a beautiful place, whether it's a garden or a table or a website. And doing that in small places allows us to do big things.
People, place, and purpose. Thank you. Okay, yes. David says,
Well, for these stories that we would like to repeat, if you would take time and write it up, tell us in 250 to 500 words what you have done, and maybe send a picture, and we will put the email address info@healingsatx.org. We have a whole section on our new website that is stories worth repeating, and it inspires other people to imitate and learn from what we're doing. So for those of you that have told your stories, or if you didn't get a chance to tell your story, send us your story. It's worth repeating.
thank you, and I want to extend, this is your personal, so I'm going to look all the way across the room. This is your personal invitation to Sunday, September the 11th, 2 to 4:30 p.m. I'm trying to get everybody's eyes here. At Oblate School of Theology Whitley Center. where we'll be launching the story portal, satx.org, with 4 very renowned storytellers and authors here in San Antonio. It's free and open to the public, the healing power of stories. We will be actually experiencing a model of how you gather around stories that you can take into your home, your community center, your school, your neighborhood, or whatever. We'll be modeling that. But there's a flyer about this. It's the greenish one that's out of the table. Okay? Anybody up here would have another remark?
That's also on the website, on our events, on the events page of the Healing SATX. If you want details, it's on the website, so you can get the
And where
details.
is it at?
It's at Oblate School of Theology. They have this beautiful center called the Whitley Center, and that's at 285
Oblate Drive.
Look at that! In fact, this guy should know. He lingers there. And he got us the space for the day, and he's going to be emceeing that day. So please come to that. I think it's going to be an energy room, a person, people, place, and purpose. So I want to, any other words up here?
Should we put up the information about the intersection?
Sure. Bill wants to know about putting up the information for At the Intersection. And it's every Thursday morning. I mentioned that from the stage earlier. We've been meeting every Thursday since April of the beginning of the pandemic, except on Thanksgiving. We have not met on Thanksgiving because it's a Thursday, it's fun. You get a briefing about something that's happening this week. It's on housing via community, because we have a housing crisis and we're working at that together as a community, but what we can do at the community level. That's this week at 8 to 8:30. He's getting the Zoom, but if you just send me your email, help me out, send me your email, and my business card is out there on the thing. I can tell you my email, but just grab my card, my email is there, and.helmke@sanantonio.gov, and I will put you on the notification list every week. This last week we talked about what's being called communities of welcome. We recognized a gap in terms of immigrants and refugees who come here to live. And it's how, like when you move someplace and you find somebody who tells you about the best grocery stores, the clinic, the da-da-da-da-da, that thing. How can we have those who are choosing to live here, who are migrating through, welcome them to become San Antonians? So we talked about that last week. That's an example. But just email me and I'll put you on that list. All right. Thank you so much. You have great weekends. I'm sure these folks will listen and answer questions. Have great weekends, good lives, and I'll see you